hope you enjoy, and I look forward to your comments. Don't forget to subscribe and like today's video.
Hello, 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 and welcome back to Order in the Feed. We are on the third hour of Alex Murdaugh's direct testimony in the murder trial of his wife Maggie and his youngest son. He is the defendant in this case. He is on trial for the murder, and he is the first defendant in this playlist that I am creating and compiling to showcase some of my favorite trials over the last handful of years of defendants that have testified in their own behalf. It is so rare for a defendant to testify that when it happens, it is a must watch. It is engaging, and it also allows you to get a rare peek inside what the accused is thinking, their side, and does it contradict the evidence, and is it believable? So I have taken his testimony and broken it up into hour by hour. That way you can watch it one by one, or if you're binge watching the trial testimony, it'll all run together. So this is the direct examination, which means that these are questions prepared by his attorney and the answers are already rehearsed, so to speak. So he knows what they're going to ask. They should know what he's going to say. I'm sure some defendants keep their attorneys on their toes, but the idea is that he should know. His attorney is Jim Griffin. He is the one that's doing the direct testimony here. Well, it's not his direct testimony, but it is his direct examination. So this is the third hour that he's on the stand during direct. Footage from the trial is coming directly from the trial channel. They've done a great job of compiling the trial all into seamless streams, and they break it up into each day. So rather than the objections and different things like that, rather than those things, they kind of cut those out and make it a seamless process. Great work, easy to follow, and that is the video that we're going to be using for this stream today. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. I will be adding commentary or my thoughts or just random point outs while this is playing. And if you did happen to miss 1 and 2, they will be linked below along with the playlist from the trial channel. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and go check them out as well. So let's go ahead and jump into this third hour. It is going to pick up. They are on the part about the lies in the media about the boat case. Briefly, the boat case is what his youngest son Paul, was a part of and have been charged with the murder of, I believe it's the murder, so don't quote me on that, but the death of, of Mallory Beach in a boating accident that he was driving. The boat belonged to the Murdoch family. If you want more context and more details on that, check out the playlist. It absolutely has, according to the prosecution, something to do with how the murders occurred or why the murders occurred. So that's kind of where Jim is picking up. This is going to pick going into the third hour there. So let's go ahead and get started.
Would be talking to? Absolutely. And why is that?
Going back this week, just a smidge. They were mid question and answer, and that way, boss, give me just a second and go ahead and back this up just a little bit.
I'd appreciate it if she would talk to them and that she just needed to tell them the truth. And did you take extra care not to talk to people that you knew Slell would be talking to? Absolutely. And why is that? After this boat wreck that you've heard so much talk about in this courtroom, there were social media, newspaper. I mean, it went deeper than that, but I mean, there was so much talk about how I fixed witnesses and structured the investigation. There's things that were totally false, that were absolutely baseless, but it was said repeatedly. It was reported repeatedly how I'd done this and this witness and influenced this police officer and all these things. So I wasn't taking any chances.
I want to ask you about, you can take that down, though. Thank you. Ask you about the August 11th interview with David Owen at the SLED office in I think here in Baltimore. Do you remember that?
August 11th, absolutely.
Had you requested that meeting?
I've been requesting, what I've really been requesting is some information. I've been begging David Owens to come meet with me, and specifically, I wanted Grandma and Papa T. There were so many questions that I couldn't answer. And I've been begging him to meet with me and to meet with Grandma and Papa T. I've been begging him for weeks and weeks.
And did you went into the meeting on August 11th? Did you think that's what it was for, to give you an update?
Yes.
And at the conclusion of the meeting, they let you know that you're their prime suspect. So,
Mr. Griffin,
I'll rephrase it. By the conclusion of the meeting, did they make it known to you that you were suspect?
Oh, there's no question about that. Absolutely. Now, he used a lot of, you hear it talk about how I'm in this circle and he can't get me out, and this and that, but there's no doubt in my mind. There was no question in my mind what was going on.
During that meeting, did they show you the Snapchat video of you trying to stand up the fruit tree?
Yes.
And were you questioned about what clothing you were wearing?
And I can't remember this. I can't remember if he showed me the whole video or he showed me a picture of it. But I was definitely showed that information. I was definitely shown those clothes in that meeting on August the 11th.
And what clothes were you wearing?
The same ones you see in.
And do you remember what kind of pants?
It was khaki pants.
And what kind of shirt?
It's a button down, short sleeve button down. I call it a dress shirt, but short sleeve button down dress shirt.
Like shirt you got there, but just short.
Just like this, but short sleeve, and it was colored.
And what color was it?
Blue with some blue stripes.
And were you questioned about when you changed out of those clothes?
I was.
And did you have a follow-up? Did you have a conversation after that meeting with Blanca about what you're wearing that day?
Absolutely.
And what was the purpose of the conversation with Blanca?
Well, they made an issue about that in that meeting. And I asked Blanca about those clothes that I had on earlier that day.
You asked her specifically about the blue shirts?
I asked her specifically about all the clothes. What I asked Blanca about specifically was, did she remember getting my clothes after she came back? When she came back to the motel, did she remember getting my clothes? It's specifically what I asked her.
I see. And then why were you asking her those questions?
Because on August the 11th, they had made an issue about me still wearing those clothes, not having changed clothes when I was in that Snapchat video. So that's why I went to Blanca.
Did they ever ask you on August 11th whether, they asked you for those clothes? Can you produce the clothes? Did they ask you that?
No, they didn't.
Have they ever asked you for those clothes?
No. As far as my understanding goes, my clothes were never an issue in this case until y'all figured out, as my lawyers figured out, that there was no blood spatter on me.
sir. Is that objection, Your Honor? 401, 402, and beyond speculation.
It's a matter of public record. It's a matter of public record.
What is?
The issues with the shirt and the blood test
It's a matter of public record.
filed in this case.
I'm well aware that my clothes never became an issue in this case until my lawyers proved that this blood spatter that they said I had on my shirt for my wife and my son was a lie, and that there was no blood on my shirt. And once they filed the documents and they proved that that was a lie, and that's in the weeks leading up to this trial.
Now, Alec, after the Maggie and Paul were murdered on June 7th and 8th, where did you stay and where did you keep clothes?
Say that again, please.
Where were you staying overnight? Let me ask you this. Did you ever spend another night at Moselle after June 7th?
Never spent another night at Moselle.
Why not?
Didn't want to.
Where were you staying? When we talked about the days and weeks, a week after, where were you staying? When you got back from the lake, COE and...
I stayed. All right, so when I got back from Greenville, so
Yes.
that would be the first week, been to my dad's funeral, then. All right, so that'd be the second week. All right, so after I know Bus and I stayed with Grandma and Papa T as much as I could, I stayed with, I stayed with my brother Randy a lot. And I stayed with my brother John. Bus and I stayed at Edisto a little bit. But at the beginning, I really stayed with either my brother Randy and his wife Christy, or I stayed with my brother John and his wife Lizzie. And basically at that time, Buster worked for Wild Wing at that time, and they've been so kind to him and they let him be off just for just a ridiculous amount of time. It was so good to him. So he stayed with me. When he had to go back to work, he would stay at my brother John and Lizzie's because it was close. So I would stay with Randy and Christy in Hampton. When Buster was there, I would almost always go to John and Lizzie's when Buster was there. I would go to John and Lizzie sometimes when Buster wasn't there. Johnny Parker, one of my partners, had a guest house his mother-in-law had lived in when she was sick. That's really, it's right at the foot of Randy's drive. It's 100 yards, 70 yards from Randy's house. And I was going to move into that house until we figured out where I could live. So I had clothes there. I had clothes at Randy's. I had clothes at John Marvin's. I had clothes at Chichesi, which is, I think you heard Buster talk about Chichesi's, like where we went to the river. And I had clothes there. I had clothes in Somerville, and I still had clothes at Moselle.
So your clothes, yes, sir.
Last question.
No, were your clothes spread out with a lot of different places?
Yes.
We will break for lunch and return in an hour and 15 minutes. That's the pace.
Mr. Murdoch, I want to go to June the 2nd, 2021, and you're meeting with Gene Seckinger. Do you remember meeting Ms. Seckinger?
I do.
And what was the meeting about?
Jeannie came up to me and asked me, previously Annette Griswold had come to me and asked me about the fee check in the Ferris case. And Jeannie was coming to me and saying that she was following up on that. If she did it, she wouldn't be doing her job. And asked me some questions.
Let me ask you,
which I understood
briefly, the Ferris fee, what originally happened to it? PMPED portion of the Ferris fee.
I mean, originally?
Yes, sir. Did it come to you directly?
Yes.
Should have come to you directly.
No.
Did when Ms. Seckinger asked you about where the fee was, what did you tell her?
I can't remember exactly what I told her. The conversation got interrupted very quickly, but I told Jeannie that the funds were in Chris Wilson's account and nothing to worry about. I didn't know where the mix-up came from.
What was your level of concern about Ms. Seckinger's inquiry to you on June the 7th?
That was some level of concern because she's asking me about money that I took that I wasn't supposed to have. So certainly I had some level of concern, but it wasn't a very big concern. As you heard testimony earlier, at some point Annette Griswold had sent Chris Wilson an email, something to the effect of, Alec thinks he has more expenses or something like that, seeking financial documents from Chris Wilson. And Chris Wilson I wasn't copied on that, but when Chris Wilson got that, Chris Wilson called me up and he's like, what is this all about?
Said objection rules 801 and 802. Response?
Your Honor, I'm not asking for what Chris Wilson said, and I'll move on. I've accepted the objection. Were you concerned about Chris Wilson opening his trust account records to your law firm?
No, I was not concerned about that at all.
And why were you not concerned?
I knew that one of the people that Chris Wilson, as you heard, Chris Wilson and I were very close. We talked every day. I did work with him all the time. And I mean, he was one of the people closest to me in the whole world. I knew everything about him. And I knew he was going through one of his partners, and he and his partner had split up. A partner and an associate had moved to a firm in Charleston. The partner was going through a divorce. The wife of the partner was trying to get Chris Wilson's trust documents in that case to find out money her husband got. It didn't have anything to do with Chris and I or anything. It totally had to do with that. But I knew that Chris Wilson was not going to send any financial documents to my law firm, at least at that time, and at least not anytime soon. So while I'm sure it registered with me that I got to deal with this, at that particular time, it wasn't anything that was a big deal.
Was there an immediate urgency to the situation on June the 7th?
No.
And I believe there's Seckinger testified about your conversation with her. You learned that your dad was going back to the hospital.
That's correct. There was a text. I can't remember if that text came from my brother Randy or my brother John, but they were the ones that were taking my dad back to the hospital that day. And whichever one was with him, I believe it's John was with him at the hospital, but I know Randy was with him at some treatment. It's in those documents. But bottom line is, we got a text saying, we knew my dad was really sick. He had cancer and he couldn't breathe. And there was a big issue about whether his inability to breathe was coming from an obstruction caused by cancer, which was the worst case scenario. And that's what it ended up being ultimately. And that's what he died from. But this particular text was saying, okay, we're putting him back in the hospital. The doctor thinks it's pneumonia, and which was, pneumonia is never a good thing, but when compared to cancer, at that time, pneumonia, that was a good thing to learn that.
So on the 7th, where the information you had, we believe at that time the prognosis was pretty positive for you, fact.
Well, it was better than the alternative. I'm not going to say it was good, but it was better than the alternative and what we previously thought it was. It didn't stay good very long, but it definitely was better.
Do you know whether or not you told Ms. Seconder that your dad's condition was terminal on the 7th? Do you remember whether you said that or not?
No, I wouldn't have said that at that time. And what Jeannie, as soon as the thing comes through that my dad's going in the hospital, Jeannie and I, as you heard, she stopped the meeting. We stopped it. It lasted a couple minutes. Now, my dad's going in the hospital, and the very next day, we learned that he's terminal. And I'm just sure that a year amount of time that's gone by, Jeannie assumed she was terminal. He was terminal.
Speculation, Your Honor.
Sections over.
Mr. Murdoch, on June the 7th, did you believe that your financial house of cards is about to crumble?
On June the 7th?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely not.
Had you had, I think there's documented evidence, state interviews, had you reached out to Russell Lacy, the Palmetto State Bank, about extending a line of credit on the Moselle company?
Yeah, I had reached out to him. I can't remember the date of that text, but it was fairly recently. I had reached out to Russell.
And on June 7th, did you have equity in the Moselle property or you and Maggie had equity in that Moselle property?
Sure. And Moselle was fully in Maggie's name.
Okay.
But yes, there was equity in Moselle. In looking at the documents that had been used, there was $1,800,000 owed. There was an appraisal for $3.3 million without timber value. And so on 1,700 acres, I don't know what the timber value was, but if you just said $1,000 an acre, that'd be another $1,000,000-something in value over and above the appraisal. I doubt the timber value was that high. I'm just using that as an example, but if it was 500, it'd be another $800,000. So, there was several $1 million in equity in that Moselle property.
All right. And did you have equity in the Edisto Beach House?
Yeah. If I remember the records correctly, there was about $250,000 owed on that house, and whatever the value was at the time. I think there's a contract for just under $1 million, so $700 and something thousand.
Did Maggie's death make it more difficult to obtain financing immediately after the murder around June 7th, 8th?
Maggie's, yes.
How so?
Because the entire Moselle property was 100% in Maggie's name. The Edisto property was 50% in Maggie's name. So I was only a half owner. So with Maggie, all I had to do is get her to sign on the documents, which she always did. She didn't question finances. So, she signed the papers. When Maggie wasn't here, there was estate issues. I couldn't go and sign the papers like I would normally go and get a loan. So I couldn't.
Was there a hearing scheduled in the voting lawsuit where you were a defendant set for that week?
Yes.
You remember what day it was scheduled for?
Well, I've heard the testimony, and I'm sure I knew at the time it's June the 10th, Thursday, June the 10th.
What was your level of concern about that hearing coming up on June the 10th?
About that hearing?
Yes, sir.
My level of concern about that hearing was about the venue motion that was coming up, which...
Now, what do you mean by venue?
The venue is where a civil lawsuit is pending. And so there's laws and rules that govern where you can bring a case. There's laws and rules that govern how certain parties, a defendant or a plaintiff, can go about trying to move it from one place to another. So in this case, the plaintiffs...
So again, he's referencing the boat case that is said to be the motive behind one of the motives behind the murder of his wife and son. So what he's explaining now is essentially the upcoming court date. It sounds like it wasn't really much of a concern to him because it wasn't really much more than changing the location. But the prosecution is saying that this is one of the pushing motives for why he did what he did. The second theory or motive that the prosecution believes is the financial crimes. Now, they allow more of the financial crimes into the trial than probably should have, based on the fact that when there's a criminal trial, the defendant has the right not to have prior bad acts to be brought up in a current case. So if, for example, a let's try that again. A career criminal, if they are on trial for robbing a store and they have done it in the past, those past charges or convictions cannot be brought up because it's a way of can possibly make it where, oh, if he did it once, he did it twice, kind of thing. So that's kind of what he's explaining here. Is the motive behind that it wasn't a concern to him, but the prosecution says it was a motive. So that's kind of what's going on in this one.
Beach family had filed suit in Hampton County. Parker's was trying to move venue to Beaufort County, and I wanted the case to stay in Hampton County.
If you're not familiar with the case, Parker's is the liquor store, not the liquor store, I'm sorry, the convenience store that sold the liquor to Paul, which was involved in the boat accident. He had used a fake ID. I guess the ID was legit. It just wasn't his. It was for the busters to purchase the alcohol from Parker's convenience store. And so what he's explaining is that that was just a motion to change. He wanted the case to stay in this county, and Parker's was trying to get it to move to a different county. And so that's kind of where he's saying, what a big deal it is, what it is, kind of thing. That's what kind of he's explain, which I don't know why he needs that much detail on it, but and do what he's going to do.
And really, that was my only thought about. I wasn't doing the legal work on those. I was a party in that case. I wasn't. I mean, Danny Henderson was primarily representing me personally. John Tiller and Amy Bauer were representing me personally, and Dawes Cook was representing me personally. And those are the guys that were doing the legal work. So, I wasn't actually doing that work. But what I was concerned about was the venue motion. I had already done what I had to do for the financial motion. And Danny Henderson was on me about getting him a financial statement because
to compel and seek a lot of financial records from you. Was that correct?
Absolutely.
And were you concerned that your financial house was going to be opened up for the world as a result of that hearing?
No. I've been a plaintiff's lawyer, like Mr. Tinsley that sat here. We do the same exact thing. In my law firm, the guys in my law firm are some of the best lawyers that I've ever known. And they're definitely some of the best lawyers in the state, handling some of the biggest cases that have ever.
So there's the second motive that the state is saying was behind the murders, was essentially that the civil part of the voting case was they were going to want his financial records, and he was in such financial distress and had been stealing from his clients that was going to come up. And he didn't want that to come up, so essentially that was the motive for the murder. Now, my personal opinion, just saying, this is how I feel. For me, I can't figure out, like in my brain, like I can't connect the two. I can't seem to comprehend like how murdering his wife and son stops him from like where the benefit is. Okay. Now, throughout the trial, the state has said that the benefit was if Paul wasn't here, the voting case wouldn't be able to move forward. I don't know if that's 100% true because at least the civil part of it could have possibly, because they were going after Alex, not Paul. Paul was a child, like he didn't have anything. So civilly, they wanted his financial records, not Paul's financial records. So they wanted to stop that. And killing Maggie didn't provide him any financial gain. If I understand it correctly, which I could be wrong, so let's not, I don't quote me on this. It's been a little bit, I would have to go back and look, but I believe that the properties like the Edisto house, which is the beach house that they had, and then even the Moselle property, I believe was in her name either primarily or both of them. So, which went into her estate. Don't know really where the motive is, like how the murders of those two like benefit him. Now, that's not saying that he didn't do it. It's not saying he didn't have a part in doing. What I'm just saying is that I believe if they had any other motive, I probably could have wrapped my head around it. But in terms of that being the reason why, now it has been said by the state or maybe a witness. Again, it's been a little bit, but that motive was to gain sympathy to, I guess, stop it or I'm not really sure how they connect the dots there. But it has been said that I believe his dad passed at around that same time. And I know that he had gotten a call at the law from the day of the murders, and his dad was sick or the day before, something like that. And so the law firm, the accountant had already, Jeannie, I believe her name is, she had already kind of backed off asking him any more questions about where the money had went that she was not able to account for in the law firm. So he didn't need to murder his wife and son, if you ask me. And also sympathy only goes so far. It doesn't stop a criminal case or a civil case or anything like that. So I just don't know how to connect the dots. But I believe after seeing a lot of the corruption that's happened in this town and things like that, and it being a small town, and they called his family like the dynasty or the legacy of the Low Country. Like his dad was a solicitor, which is what they call like attorneys or prosecutors or whatever in the area. His grandfather was. They had to take the pictures down in the courtroom of his family so that there was no prejudice against him, things like that. And so it was one of those, like, he went to school with probably everybody on the jury, so they definitely couldn't distance that part. It was just one of those kind of communities. And so I believe that it's possible that the prosecution, because you kind of have to have a reason why this would happen, if you're going to go and bring the charges and the burden of proof being on the state, I believe that it really would be best that they could do the fact that his grandfather possibly put some of these people in jail or their family in jail, or the charges were brought by his, things like that. Like there's just a lot of history there that it wouldn't be hard to convince a jury that he murdered them, but they had come up with the motive. So I just personally can't wrap my head around it. But share in the comments kind of how you like if you connect the dots that way. I think I'm used to just usually seeing a textbook type of case where it's, there's a life insurance policy like Corey Richards or whatever. She got it on her husband, and then she thought there were multiple ones in her name as a beneficiary. That to me, I can wrap my head around, like there was a financial gain there she thought she was going to be able to get. This one, I don't, it hasn't came up. Like he didn't get a financial gain out of it. So I don't know how it solved his problems, and I don't know how far sympathy may get you when you're stealing money. So I don't know, but like I said, that's kind of my thought on that.
Going on in this state. In my 27 years of practicing, plaintiffs always are trying to look and get financial documents of corporate defendants, of, those type things. In my 27 years, I've never been able to get a judge to order anything more than a net worth statement prior to getting into a phase at trial. So early on in the case, I am not aware of, I personally have never, despite trying repeatedly, have never been able to get a judge to order the kind of information that Mark Tinsley was saying he was seeking.
Were you working on a document for that upcoming hearing?
Yes.
And what was that?
A financial statement. A financial statement lists your assets and your liabilities.
And had you reached out to Jeannie Seconder later the day on the 7th to get your current balance of your retirement account?
I don't remember doing that, but that'd certainly be something that I did, because I know I'd have to have that for that financial statement. And the document that I prepared was what Mark Ball talked about that he found later in my office. And it was it was handwritten, ready to be typed up by, because of the charges against Paul, I kept everything very close in the civil case. It was Danny in his office. It was doing it. And I had that document prepared handwritten in the neatest handwriting that I could make, because a secretary other than mine, a paralegal other than mine, was going to be the person who was going to put that financial information into the final document. And that's the document that Mark Ball talked about that he found on my desk whenever it was that he found it. So that was what was going to be, if necessary, what was going to be used Thursday.
Alex, jury's heard about testimony of you stealing client funds. Did you do that?
I did.
Did you steal or divert that Ferris fee away from the law firm?
I did.
How did you get in such a financial predicament that led you to steal money that wasn't yours?
No, I'm not quite sure how I let myself get where I got, but it came from, I battled that addiction for so many years. I was spending so much money on pills. I got in a spot I couldn't.
Now, what type of addiction are you referring to?
My addiction is to opiate painkillers,
and when
specifically oxycodone, OxyContin.
And when did you first become dependent or addicted to opioids?
Oxycodone or opiates in general?
Opiates in general.
I'm not quite sure of the exact date, but I can give you a time frame. I hurt my knee really bad playing football in college, and I had a knee surgery. And the medical science at the time was such that the surgery didn't work, bottom line. So it just didn't last. So within a couple of years of that, I started having a lot of knee troubles. And ultimately, I had to have a couple of surgeries. But the last surgery I had was, I think, around 2004. And I think it was around 4. So I would have started taking hydrocodone a couple of years before that. And I took hydrocodone, got addicted to that very quickly. I continued taking that for a long time. I'd force myself off of it, wean myself off of it, go back to it. I battled that for a long time. And after a while, I was taking so much of that, I moved on to oxycodone. I'm guessing that was around 2000. The transition was around 2008, 9, something like that. And of course, it just escalates.
Did you receive treatment or go to detox on occasion?
I did.
How many times?
That I went to detox or that I detoxed?
Well, let's start with going to a detox facility.
I've been to a detox facility 3 times.
When was the first time?
December of 2017.
Before December 2017, have you tried to detox at home?
I tried to detox everywhere I could. When Maggie would help me. Go ahead.
Yeah, when you went in to was it inpatient facility?
The detoxes, the formal detoxes that I went
in December 2017.
Yes, it was inpatient. All 3 formal detoxes that I've done have been at the same facility called Sunrise Detox in Atlanta, Georgia.
And it's
very good facility.
Jury's heard an audio tape of a telephone conference with SLED agents. Was that where you were?
Just for the record, I'm not laughing that he detoxed, because that's a very serious thing, and it takes multiple trips for some people to be able to fully kick that habit. And the sounds of it, it took him being criminally charged, knowing he was getting ready to go to jail, to go back in and detox and kick that habit. But my smirk was, it sounded like he was giving them a shout out, like, good facility. I'm going to endorse that one anyway. So, and just we'll continue.
During that meeting with Mr. Harpootli and I?
That's correct.
The first time you went to the detox in Atlanta, how long of a stay is that? Did you stay?
7 days is the opiate detox program.
And is there a difference between detox and rehab?
Yes.
What's the difference?
Detox is the act of getting the drugs out of your system, getting to the point where, okay, there is no longer a physical dependency, all right? And that's a big difference than the rest of the dependency, but the physical dependency is supposed to be gone after 7 days. So in other words, there's so many things. Opiate withdrawal is, it's hard. But supposedly at the end of 7 days, you don't have those physical symptoms. Like, I don't want to be too graphic, but you're sick, you throw up, you have terrible diarrhea, you sweat like you're running a marathon, you can't hold your legs still, you can't lay down. Now, like what I'm talking about, the legs moving, that goes away after about 24 hours. So, after about 24 hours, you can lay down again and maybe sleep some, but you sweat and you throw up. You just have, there's so many issues, but after 7 days, those are supposed to be over. That's what detox is, the detoxification of your body.
And what's rehab?
Rehab is the period that you go to learn how to stay off. You know, you're supposedly off after detox. Rehab is where you get help staying off.
And before September 2021, had you ever gone to that second stage of rehab?
No.
So in December 2017, how long did it take you to relapse once you got home from detox?
Not long at all. You're still going through, and though this physical dependency is gone, you still have, you're still so sick. You just.
Is that something you've been battling for quite some time?
Long as I can remember.
How long have you been drug-free, opioid-free?
535 days. And I'm very proud of that.
I want to ask you questions about Labor Day weekend 2021. You remember being confronted by your law firm?
Sure I did.
Well, what were you confronted about?
Stealing money.
And did you admit your misconduct to your law partners?
Well, to one of my law partners and my brother and my law partner, so Danny and Randy. Yeah, I mean, admit it.
And they learned about a fake Forge account. You admit to the fake Forge account.
Yes, I did.
And did you tell them about your opioid struggles, opioid addiction?
I told them about my addiction. Yes, sir.
To your knowledge, were any of your law partners aware of your addiction?
Not just in my knowledge. I'm certain that they were not aware of my addiction.
How would you characterize your opioid use or addiction? Severe, moderate?
Then or now?
No, in 2020, 2021?
I don't know how I would have characterized it then. After going to rehab and learning more of the things I've learned, really talking to addicts about experiences. I will tell you that my addiction was extremely, extremely bad.
How were you able to function? Or were you able to function?
Yes, I was able to function.
You were able to practice law?
Yes.
And were you successful practicing law while you were addicted to opioids?
On some level, yes, sir. I was successful.
After you were confronted on Labor Day weekend 2021, did you resign, or were you forced to resign from a law firm?
Absolutely.
And then on Saturday, September the 4th, do you remember what happened that day?
Saturday, September 4th, yes, sir, I remember.
What happened?
Thought when I woke up.
Well, let's start after you met with Chris Wilson. Did you meet with Chris Wilson?
I met with Chris Wilson at my mom's and dad's house in Alameda.
And did you lay it out for Chris Wilson, your opioid addiction and your misconduct?
I definitely laid out my addiction, definitely gave him some details about monies that I had taken. We didn't go into all the details about all of it, but I certainly was very candid with him about the things that involved him.
Had you already contacted the detox facility before you met with Chris Wilson on the phone?
I believe that we had already, at that point, already spoken to the guy that I knew from Sunrise and made arrangements for me to go there on Monday.
Okay. And
I know we had arrangements for me to go there on Monday, and I'm sure we had to have had it by then because I went to the hospital shortly after that. So yes.
And did you reach out to Blanca to get your insurance information? And what was your immediate plans after? For the day after you met with Chris Wilson, did you have plans to do anything? Have any other meetings on that Saturday?
I wanted to go and meet with Corey Fleming, who was another lawyer who was affected by the things I did.
And did you?
On a good friend.
Did you go meet with Corey Fleming?
No.
What'd you do instead?
I'd given when I gave my pills to my brother Randy and Danny. I think I gave them to Randy, but I took a lot of pills because I knew I wasn't going to be taking anymore. So Randy had my pills. I had to get some from him the night before, but I only got a small amount. I could tell, I wasn't taking anything near like what I had been taking. So I knew it was coming. And I called someone to bring me more pills. And before I met with Chris Wilson.
And did you meet did the person you called bring you more pills?
I don't know if he brought me more pills or not, because by the time I met with him, after meeting with Chris and after, the starting of the withdrawals, I changed my plan.
And what was the change in plans?
Not to get pills from him anymore. And instead, I asked him to shoot me.
Okay, so I was actually getting ready to pause it and just let him finish his thought, but he walked me right into it. So I was going to mention that the reason that this part of his testimony is so clunky sounding is because prior motions, prior to the trial, there were some rulings by the judge that certain things could not come in. And so what he's referencing, again, if you're not familiar with the case, what he's referencing is there was another incident in this saga. When I say saga, it was like a never-ending saga. Still is, actually. They call it the roadside shooting. You can find it in anyone's playlist, but I'm going to refer you to the trial channel. I'm sure they cover it in this playlist of the trial. I know it has been referenced. So what it is that his cousin Eddie, that's what they call him, cousin Eddie. Cousin Eddie was his supply connection. So what he's saying is that he was going to meet with him and get more pills, and instead he changed the plan and decided to have him shoot him. So he is traveling down the road. He calls 911, and I don't know how far into this he's going to get. So I'm just going to kind of give like brief details, but that he had a flat tire, and somebody came up and I believe it was a flat tire, came up and shot. He had been shot. Now it later came out that he had set that up. I don't know if he told that he set it up or essentially they kind of cornered him and he admitted it, but I guess so that Buster could get which is his older son, could get his life insurance money is what I believe the plan was. But the reason that the testimony is clunky back to that is because that isn't supposed to be so much introduced in the trial, because again, it allows the jury, well, if he'll do that, which I think he pled guilty to or has accepted the charges or something, but essentially, if he can do that, then he must have done this situation. So he's trying to keep from saying Cousin Eddie's name, because if he says Cousin Eddie's name, the prosecution's like, hey, now it's fair game. We can introduce what we have about Cousin Eddie being the set. Let me call Cousin Eddie. He can give his account of what actually happened. So on it gets into a whole thing. And they call it opening the door or whatever. And so he can't really say his name. He can't give too many details. So he's really tiptoeing around, but trying to give enough context of it. And so that's why that was so clunky on his part, is because he really has to be mindful of what comes out of his mouth. The slightest slip of something can open up that door. And so, but like I said, I was letting him finish up and he walked us right into what this next part is, which is the roadside shooting. So, and then that gives us we're about 15 minutes from our stopping point. So you're going to wrap this last part, and then I will make sure it's all linked below, and you will also have the next part for the fourth hour. So, but let's go ahead and let him tell about this roadside shooting, but it will remain clunky so that he doesn't accidentally slip up and say something.
Did you ask him to shoot you as a sympathy ploy, or did you want
As a sympathy ploy?
Yes, sir. Why did you ask him to shoot you? What was the end goal that you wanted to accomplish?
I meant for him to shoot me so I'd be gone.
And who was this? Who did you ask to do this?
Eddie Smith.
And did he in fact shoot you?
He did.
And where was that located? Not your gunshot, but where were you shot? In Hampton and Colony County. Where were you?
It's Hampton County. It's just right on the border of Salkehatchie Road. It runs right along the Salkehatchie River.
And why did you want to be gone?
I mean, I knew all this was coming to a head. I knew how humiliating it was going to be for my son. I mean, I'd been through so much at the time in the bad place that I was. It seemed like a better thing to do. I don't think that way now, thankfully, but I did at the time.
Did you have life insurance on you?
Oh, yeah, I had a lot of life insurance.
And who was the beneficiary?
Maggie was the beneficiary.
How much life insurance did you have?
I had $12 million. I had a $4 million policy and an $8 million policy.
So I don't know anything about life insurance, so don't feel free to educate me in the comments below on this. But it seems like a lot of life insurance for a man that is a lawyer. I mean, like, he doesn't have like a super dangerous job or anything like that. So it just seems like that's a lot of life insurance. I don't know when he got the policies. They may tell, I don't remember, whatever. So we'll have to kind of see. But it's a lot of life insurance on someone that go like to an office or to a courtroom. Now, I'm not saying courtrooms can't be dangerous. I can't say you wouldn't get in a car, different things like that. But I'm just saying it's a lot of life insurance stuff. But again, if there's not a policy on Maggie and there's one on him, it'd been more beneficial for him to allow her to be the beneficiary of the policy, allow her to collect on it, if you're kind of catching up here. And one, this is how I see it. If you look at it at what you have to gain, and then you look at it as the motive that the prosecution's saying, they're saying that, like I mentioned before, it essentially is a sympathy thing, so forth, so on, because he had these financial crimes and whatever that are coming to a head. Okay. So if that's the case, he was the main defendant on the civil case. Yes, Paul would not be facing criminal charges because he's no longer here, but in terms of the financial crimes from stealing from his law firm clients, again, that was on him, not on Maggie. So if he's in this huge financial mess and he's trying to avoid it coming to light and buying some time, I guess, is kind of how they explain it, which I don't know where he was getting all that money that he had taken and placing all that money. I don't know, like, I mean, they never came up with that they knew he had a plan. So here are that. No, wouldn't it make more sense? Just hear me out. Don't come dragging me in the comments. Just hear me out. Wouldn't it make more sense for him to take action for Maggie to be able to collect the life insurance he had on himself, which was $12 million? She's the beneficiary. It would wipe out, I would say, the civil case unless she was a co-defendant, and then she'd still be liable. But that's a whole court thing. Like, in fact, if you want to talk about sympathy, she would probably get more sympathy than Alex did because she's now a widow with, anyways, but there's that. And I think that women seem to garner more sympathy and things like that than men. Also, he was the primary breadwinner and he had the career. She was a very much a stay at home mom and housewife and things like that. And with him not around, you know, the struggle would be a little different for her than it would have been for him. So there's that. Also, the other thing is that the financial crimes would go with him so that that wouldn't have been anything. So she would have been financially okay. The financial crimes would go away. He wouldn't have to face that, and all's well. If you look at it in the grand scheme of things, like in that area, motive purposes. So I guess that's where I don't like. It makes more sense now. He didn't think to do that, yet he thought to do it as he felt like they were closing in and he was going to be facing jail time, is how I see it. But I don't know if he didn't actually want it to end his life. And so it was just a graze, or if Eddie Smith, aka his cousin Eddie, was just a headshot and it grazed it. By the way, no humor there, but I mean, if you set it up and kind of aren't even kind of fail at it, kind of makes it kind of hard to take it as take it serious. And the state didn't take it serious. They didn't see it as it was a serious attempt. But so that's the thought there. The other thing I was thinking, and I didn't want to stop it again, so I was gonna wait. Was when I had mentioned like I haven't seen a financial benefit that was going to help him out of all of this by Maggie and Paul no longer being around. So, but if again, like he was needing money to fix whatever the financial crimes or the boat case and things like that, his dad was sick, very sick, and I believe he was put on hospice, like I said, the day or so before the murders, and then passed not long after. So the way I understand it, he was set to inherit a good chunk of money. So his wife and son were still alive whenever he was notified that his dad was put on hospice or was going to be put on hospice. So wouldn't the inheritance kind of solve that problem? Anyway, so for me, I don't know. Like I said, I just have a hard time wrapping my head around that he killed his wife and son. Not saying he didn't, not saying he did. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen this trial or heard anything about it, years, but he was convicted of it. So, my opinion on that doesn't matter. But anyway, so that's just kind of my thought there. I will continue on.
Number 12.
Did you ever have any life insurance on Mac?
No.
You ever have any life insurance on Paul?
No.
I'm just getting ready to switch my screen back, but Okay, so there's a confirmation. I was about 90% sure that that was the case, that he did not have a life insurance policy on Maggie, and I didn't even think about Paul. But so there's a confirmation that there was no policy on her. And now to add, or on Paul, but there was one on him. Something to think about.
Alex, will you tell this jury about Maggie and your relationship with her?
Y'all saw a picture. She was just as beautiful inside as she was outside. I mean, she was so adventurous. I mean, you couldn't tell her something was good or bad. And she wanted to find out for herself. She wanted to do it, see it, experience it on her own and form her own opinion. She was devoted. Those two boys, Buster, Paul, me. I mean, she made sure we didn't want for anything ever. Fun, playful. I mean, she had a laugh that, you didn't even have to know what was funny. If you heard her laugh, you would laugh. Yeah. She had this little playful look where she'd smile at you and bite her lip. I can't do it, but when she'd just do it, it just melts you. She was such a lady, such a feminine person, a girl. But then she had two boys. And I mean, she didn't grow up in the swamp and in the country, riding four-wheelers and hunting and fishing. I mean, she changed everything. I mean, she became a boy's mom. I mean, her life became ball and riding four-wheelers and, I mean, doing those things. Now, don't get me wrong, she was still 100% girl. And you heard Mary say, I mean, she loved to do those things with her nieces, but I mean, she threw herself into her boy's life. I mean, she never took not working for granted. I mean, she might not have worked, but I promise you, she worked. And she worked to make sure me and Paul and Buster had everything. She wanted a big family, and pregnancy just didn't suit her. Her pregnancies were so hard. I would leave her in the mornings and she'd be sick. I'd come home and check on her and she'd be sick. I'd come back at the end of the day and she'd be sick. I mean, she was so sick all the time. With both those boys, when we had Paw, Maggie got in trouble and Paw got in trouble, and this pregnancy didn't suit her. So we decided that, we would just have the two boys. And, I just think how hard it was on her. Just made her love those boys so much more. And she did. But she was the kind of person, Maggie, she could put on the most elegant ball gown and go to the governor's mansion and hang out with, the most affluent people, whatever. Or she could come down to, she could go to a food bank in Hampton or Walterburg and fit in. Everybody at those places would say when she left, and that Maggie, she's a good one. She's just a special person.
Alex, would you ever do anything to harm Maggie?
I would never hurt Maggie, ever.
Will you tell the jury about Paul, please, and your relationship with him?
Okay, so I'm going to stop the feed just a little shy of the full hour. That way, the fourth part of his testimony can start fresh at Paul. So we're going to wrap up the third hour of Alex Murdaugh's direct testimony in the murder trial of his wife and youngest son, Paul, that he is standing trial for. He is the defendant and he is testifying. He is being direct examined by his attorney, Jim Griffin. And so I believe there's like another lunch. So we'll start about the 3-hour mark. Oh, actually, does that wrap up direct? Looks like it does. So my mistake. What we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and finish up this last 5 minutes. It looks like, yeah. Okay. So we'll just go ahead and wrap this last 5 minutes up. So ignore everything I have said.
I mean, Papa was just the brightest. He was the brightest. He's the most inquisitive young man. He wanted to be a part of everything. If you were working, I can remember as a little boy, you'd be working on something. It didn't matter what it was. His little head was going to come in there, his nose in there to see what you were doing. He was a man's man. He was 100% country boy. He was tough. I mean, he could hunt anything, catch any fish. He could run any piece of equipment. He could use any tool. I mean, he could do anything. At 22 years old, he could do so many things. I mean, he took care of so many, and he was so tough. But on the other hand, he had a side to him that was just so sweet. I mean, he wouldn't come home, but he wouldn't go check on his grandparents. He wouldn't go near Centerville where he wouldn't go out of his way to check on his grandparents. Be such a tough person. He would get all of his buddies and get on a boat and go watch the sunset. Only 22-year-old people, do stuff like that. I mean, he was such a special boy. He cared about people. He was fiercely loyal. He was so misrepresented in the media. I mean, never an accurate story told about what he was. And I'll challenge you right now. I'll challenge everybody in this room to go find somebody that knew Pawpaw, who really knew him, that did not have an ulterior motive, that would say something negative about him. And I challenge everybody who can hear me now to do that. Me and Paul was that kind of person. If you knew him, he would help you, and he would be glad to help you. I thought Mark Ball made a good point when he said, Pawpaw might not have quite found his place yet. Paul was ADHD, and so he would jump around from thing to thing a lot. But there's absolutely no question in my mind whatsoever that Pawpaw would have found whatever that thing was that he was going to do. And whatever that ended up being, he was going to be one of the best at it that you've ever known. And I'll tell you one more thing. I didn't even know this when Paul was alive, but excuse me. When they were doing his eulogy, I gave the names of some of his friends, and he had a real cute friend that they were just friends, but a cute little girl Maggie adored. I didn't know her very well, but Maggie did. Maggie adored her, but they talked to her, and Pawpaw, we learned this from her, Julianne. And at 22 years old, Pawpaw would tell his friends, be present, appreciate where you are, the things you have, and the people around you. I think a lot of that came from it hurt Paul so bad when Mallory died. But 22-year-olds, do you know that think that way? Be present, appreciate things around you. At 22 years old, he's the most special boy.
Do you love Paul?
But I love him like no other. Him, Buster.
You love Maggie?
More than anything. I love Maggie. From the first time we went out.
Did you kill Maggie?
No, I did not kill Maggie. I did not kill Paul. I would never hurt Maggie, and I would never hurt Paul. Ever, under any circumstances.
Thank you. Who's answering your question?
There you go, real quick.
Okay, so that's going to wrap up. Let me fix this awful pause. Actually, you know what? I can take that down. Okay, so that's going to wrap up the direct examination of Alex Murdaugh. Now, if you watched video 1 or 2, of his direct examination, I said multiple times in both videos about the telling what happened, whichever he's being questioned about. And it's very matter of fact. And then he would just drop into an emotional, crying or upset. And it seemed like it was around the times of if a normal person would think that would be an emotional thing. So some of them just seemed kind of like rehearsed. Personally, no offense, but I hope he was a better attorney than he was an actor. Like, it just felt as if he were acting, kind of trying to force an emotion because he felt like others thought that's where he should be emotional. But as he was talking about his wife, and really when he was talking about his son Paul, that emotion, I feel like, was a real breakthrough or emotional outlet, regardless if he did it, regardless if he didn't do it. How he felt about his wife and his son was very obvious to me in that testing there. So I did want to kind of add that in because I did in the previous videos mention a lot of how, some of it I just wasn't quite sure if it was a oncome of emotion or if it was a forced emotion, which does not change whether he's guilty or innocent or any of those things. It was just how I seen things or how I felt about when he would get emotional at certain points of his testimony. But here we are. He is done with direct and we'll be getting ready for his cross-examination. Now, we're going to wrap this up, and the next video will be the start of he crossed with the prosecutor, Creighton Waters. What's his name? I will correct if I'm wrong. Also, be watching the cross-examination with the footage from the trial channel. Make sure to check them out. The link will be below. They have a YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe and like while I am wrapping this. That testimony was prepared. He knew what questions were coming, and his attorneys should have known what answers were coming. The next part is not so predictable. Don't have an idea of what they're going to ask, but the interaction is pretty spicy. I believe when I say it's not common for defendants to testify, that is very true. You can see that across the beginning of time. It's not that they don't, it's just uncommon in criminal trials. And I'm not sure if Creighton Waters has had many of them because he seemed like he was going to make sure he got the most out of it. Did he do his job? Absolutely. But the back and forth with him and Alex, it gets pretty intense and then kind of repetitive as well. So, but yeah, so that will be our next video. Thank you again for checking this out. I hope that you are enjoying seeing the testimony of Alex Murdaugh, that the situation is an enjoyable one because it's a very sad situation, very sad and tragic occurrence in that family, and wouldn't wish it upon anybody and couldn't imagine how that type of tragedy takes a family, a toll on them. But I do hope that you enjoyed the compiled testimony for you to watch. So check the description down below for the next video, part 4. I'm not sure if I'm naming it part 4 or not yet, but it'll be linked down below, which will be the beginning of cross-examination. Until next time.